Dum 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 dum. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Storytiles The Hobby. Today we are going to have a brief look at a kind of a unique experiment that I'm performing, and that is to combine two no combat adventure games with one another. One is a board game, Dungeonology. Another one is a role-playing game, Mappa Mundi. Now, Dungeonology is a game that I wanted to get to the table quite for a long time now. I have not played it in probably over 2 years, maybe 3 years even. But I've always admired the most excellent production values of the game. I kind of paused because the game is, in my opinion, not great. There's a lot of rule issues in terms of clarity. Not so much that the rules are not great, but you know, I have some difficulty getting into them. And above all, it's kind of just a Euro cube pushing game where you collect cubes and victory points, and then you compete against other players to see who wins or who meets their goal. Now, I'm not that kind of a player. I've always wished for more story-driven adventure games, and so I kind of left this on the shelf for the longest time. And it wasn't until Mappa Mundi, which came out this year, that I was really, really enticed to go back to Dungeonology. Why? Well, let me explain to you. That's what this video is about, how to combine Dungeonology, a board game, with Mappa Mundi, a role-playing game. Now, a very unique kind of a game, both for Dungeonology and Mappa Mundi, because, as said, these are no combat games. These are games where you do not succeed by slaying monsters or even hunting them down. That's not the nature of the game. And that is a rarity in today's landscape of adventure games, where essentially everything revolves around basically just killing stuff and seeing who comes out on top. That is not something that I'm that much interested in, to be honest. I find that there are more creative ways of telling a story and going on an adventure. There's exploration, there's investigation, there's conversations you can have with non-player characters, there's discoveries to be made, journeys to be had, and all these things kind of take a back seat to what is usually a combat game. So, having said all that, that's the preamble. How are we going to do this? I am not going to show you a play-by-play. That's not the kind of channel that I am. I don't go through a few steps of the game to show you how it plays. I'm just here to speak conceptually about how to combine these two games with one another, so hopefully successfully. I will be trying it out in the time to come, and maybe I'll return with a sort of a bookend video explaining what went wrong, what went well, and if it actually even works. Okay, so Dungeonology. A brief overview of what Dungeonology is. So Dungeonology, a game by Ludus Magnus Studio. I kind of like Ludus Magnus Studios and kind of not. They bring out a lot of competitive games, a lot of games in the style of Black Rose Wars, and that is sort of a competitive game that I'm not really interested in. Now, Nova Aetus Renaissance, that recently also released, that is the type of game that I really, really enjoy. You can see the map right over here. It's a very immersive fantasy setting in old Renaissance Italy, where you are performing little dungeon crawler kind of quests, and you play them out on a tactical board with miniatures, and you can see the miniatures right here, examples of really how good Ludus Magnus Studio really is. But yeah, these minis are really quite outstanding. Very dynamic, very, in this case, very comical, because that's the nature of the game. But like all of LMS's sculpts, they're just beautiful to behold. And that's not even talking about like the illustrations on the boards and on the cards. They are just outstanding as well. You play in a 3D environment. You can see a backdrop of a building right there. You play a scholar whose character is placed on a board, and the player board basically is your collection area for cubes, and the cubes, they represent the ecosystem of the monster or the villain that you're trying to write a paper on. Because they are all students. They have not grown into full-fledged adventuring adults just yet. And so the nature of the game is that you collect these cubes as intel for your thesis that you write. And then at any given point, if you think that you can match the value of your target, for instance, this could be a target. You have basically a base value. You have some modifiers on the 5 different areas of the ecosystem of which you're collecting cubes down here. And if you can beat that value, then you can successfully submit your thesis. And if not, then it's go back to start for you, and other players get a chance to try. These characters, these scholars, just look at how beautiful and evocative these miniatures are. Obviously, I painted them up, but like even if you just look at the regular sculpts, they are just very detailed. These are 2 enemies, for instance, and you can see a little bit the comical element shining through of the game itself. The Easter Bunny. And these students you place on a board that is right there, like a little campfire board, and that effectively is the timer of the game. Now, this is the second point of the game that I don't like, the competitive nature being the first, but the fact that there's a timer tied to it, because it kind of also indicates what the third point is, which is wrong with this game. It's a take that kind of game. So competitively, you're playing out these cards over here, and they are spell cards and ability cards, and you're trying to trip each other up as you're going through the local ecosystem. This is an example of a tile that you pull, and you're collecting like these cubes for your thesis. You also get like those cards played upon you from other players, and that can take on really nasty proportions to a point where you are playing a 2-hour, maybe even 3-hour game that is essentially just about collecting those cubes and seeing who beats that score on one of these cards. That is not fun to me, not even in the solo capacity, because there is a solo mode to this game. I played it once, it was okay, but again, I need something more adventure-y. There are good things about this game. Like I said, there are illustrations that are very evocative. There are several rulebooks that are really worth looking through, because now they've brought out revised versions and it's much clearer now. But there's also like just a whole bunch of narrative text that goes along with it. Like this, for instance.
The university opens its doors to reveal the knowledge kept in its ancient libraries, join one of the student congregations, and, led by charismatic leaders, enjoy a year of carefree campus life, dedicating yourself to your favorite studies. Explore the surroundings by studying the fauna, or enter the underground inhabited by strange monstrous species. Perhaps you will be daring explorers enough to find the entrances to the mysterious supernatural caves deep in the region, from which even the most experienced dungeonologist, the famous Enrico Giovanni, has not returned. The legends of Bosco Bione say that divine entities from other times and other realities live in these remote places. Will you be the one to reveal their secrets?
So there's some good lore here. It's nice, and I think that the villains are very colorful. The characters as well. There's probably like about 12 characters and an equal amount of villains, most of which, by the way, are not painted. They're all back there. But you can see that there's descriptions. There's like a nice little campaign mode that goes through the months of the year as you basically track these people down, these creatures. And that is just so cool to me. So I wanted to do this campaign, but not in the style of the game as it is played in. Now, how do we play it then? Well, that's where Mappa Mundi comes in. Unfortunately, I only have the PDF right now. I don't have the book. The book is absolutely gorgeous, what I've seen from videos. A matte quality to the paper that makes it feel like parchment, like it was actually printed in some archaic press, even though it takes place in the far, far future, I feel like, or an alternative Earth where the flux has occurred, something environmental has occurred, and basically everything reverted back to a kind of medieval-ish kind of a time. The game itself takes place in this world that looks very much like our Earth. If you can imagine this being Eurasia, so Europe, you can see like the tip of North Africa, Middle East, you can see Asia over there. And that's just the core. They will no doubt bring out more, but you can see that it does take place on our world. But in a future or in an area or alternate universe where things are just very different. What I liked about this role-playing game is that everything is very, very narrative. Like, there are a lot of strange terms that you will encounter in this book that you kind of have to wrap your head around and make your own. That's probably another reason why I don't want to do a live playthrough on the channel, because I would no doubt get that all wrong. Basically, you create 4 characters. Here's an archivist, for instance, with a lot of story that goes along with it, because again, it's very narrative. And they can specialize down the road. They can get endorsements, but they have skills that complement their dice rolls, or even replace them completely if the player feels that the situation calls for a specific skill, and they have to narratively support that. So they do have to tell like a story. And in fact, and this is one of the more unique aspects of Mappa Mundi, the role-playing game is very heavy leaning towards player input. The players, they contribute probably like 60 to 70% of the story and the world building, which is something what normally a GM or a arbiter, a narrator of a game would do. The narrator is, by the way, the term for the GM in Mappa Mundi. With the result that you have great agency as a player to shape, and that's literally the term that they use, to shape basically the world of Mappa Mundi. I forgot what the world is called. Start with an E. And then you have interactions. Now, interactions, they come into play when you encounter one of the beasties. This is like an example of one of the beasties that you will find in Barbecia. Barbecia being the area of France, sort of morphed into this area. You also get like sheets that come clear of all this terrain, so you can fill out your own maps. You're encouraged to draw, you're encouraged to write. But here, for instance, is the Helix Calcul, and you can see here, there's not a lot of, in terms of number stats. This game does not do a lot of numbers. You do roll dice, and you do have some abilities that deal with numbers, and you also track your number of successes and fails on your dice rolls. But basically what you do is you try to find out what the behaviors are of this beastie. And the behaviors are matched with interactions. The interactions belong to the chroniclers, which is the name for the player characters. And they basically have to figure out through the description of the narrator what exactly they have to use, what kind of interaction they can apply to discover the behavior of the monster. And the more behaviors that they get right, the more success they eventually have. And if they fail to figure out these behaviors, then there's something called threads, and that is the connection of the monster to its environment and to the world. They are frayed and eventually even severed. And if they are all severed, then the monster will flee, or the monster may even attack, but that's very rare. The research, the expedition has gone awry and you fail. But this is a very fail-forward system. Failure is rewarded through points that you can use to heighten your abilities and also get new skills, but also just from a narrative point of view, failure in role-playing games is always much more interesting. So anyway, that's this system. I just want to show one more thing. This is the sort of the log that you keep track of. It's just a sheet that you can print out. You have the research phase, the journey phase, and the encounter phase. In the research phase, you can essentially encounter NPCs, figure out, if they know something about some plots, mystery that is going on. Maybe, another NPC has been hurt or is missing from a local village, and they suspect that a monster may have been involved. Or maybe, there's a new monster that has been discovered on the horizon, and, you're basically just curious to figure out what it has done up until this point, and maybe some more tips and tricks of where to find it. And so the research phase is all about employing your abilities. The 4 abilities, they are traversal, observation, deduction, and exploration, and figuring out as much as possible about the monster and other facts that are going on. And the more that you get right, the more journey cards, which are landscape cards, big landscape cards that you have play in the journey that you wander through, the more of them will be right-wise up, which basically means that they are pointed in the right direction upwards, and you see a perfectly nice little idyllic. Why am I even explaining this? Why don't I just show you? So I printed, again, these out by myself because I did not have the physical copy, and this is not very representative because obviously I printed them very small. These are like Hobbit-sized cards, and what you'll get in the game are like these huge, gorgeously produced tarot cards, and so, you know, it is what it is. I printed them out like this because I want to use them on the map, so smaller cards would just work better for me at the moment. But the idea is that these cards represent locations, landscape types, and they are all reversible, that you turn them upside down, and then you see a much darker, a much more dystopian kind of version of that landscape than when it's the right ways up. That's called inverted, and those cards end up inverted in your journey deck when you don't succeed in ability checks during the research phase. So that's the nice connection between research phase and journey phase, is that it influences the cards, aka the terrain that you go through on your way to an encounter. The idea is to get as many of these cards the right side up and hopefully have a much easier journey from where you start out to where the encounter will take place. And when the encounter does take place in the encounter phase, that is when you basically try to match as many interactions with behaviors as possible. And you also shape, there's that word again, you basically story tell the way that you do it, the way that you map this creature out. Now, I've done, no doubt, horrible disservice towards the creators of Mappa Mundi in explaining this game. I apologize for that, but that is essentially what Mappa Mundi is. Now, why did I want Mappa Mundi reskinned with the Dungeonology IP and play it like that and not just Mappa Mundi itself? Well, again, because I wanted to play Dungeonology, I wanted to explore all the creatures in there, all the characters and locations, and well, that's the third part. How are we going to do this? So, very provisionally, I have made, first of all, a player sheet. A player sheet to very handily put your player board on top of. And the idea is then that, of course, you can place your card on there, who you are. In this case, it's Rebecca. But you can see here already there are things that belong to Mappa Mundi and not to Dungeonology. This is what the character sheet looks like in Mappa Mundi, which is not bad. It's exactly what you expect to have. You have your abilities down here. You have successes and failures, expertise that you may get, your skills, your interactions, and then of course, specialization, endorsement, license, character name. There's some fate points there. I figured, well, you know, I'm a graphic designer. I can reskin this in the form of Dungeonology. So there's name, license, endorsement, specialization, fate. Fate, we can actually use this little handy dandy wheel for. It's used for different reasons in Dungeonology, but in Mappa Mundi, fate is used as sort of a meta currency to manipulate small outcomes of situations that you would wish happened differently. You just basically flip a coin and get like a success or a fail out of it, or you can trade them in for more interactions, so you can actually interact with the monster if you don't have the proper interactions to match those behaviors. Injuries are here. Archetypes we haven't talked about, nor inclinations, but these are two sort of really cool solo systems to kind of simulate the players. Because you, as a solo player, you are not actually playing as a player. You have these boards out there, but you are playing as the narrator, as the GM essentially, and you are overlooking the world and you are telling the story. You're shaping the narrative of a chronicle, of like an adventure. But what you're also doing is you're running kind of like a simulation of these 2, 3, 4 chroniclers that will be going on this adventure for you. And so in order to simulate kind of the personas of how the players wanted to play their characters, you have boons and flaws that say more about who that character is as opposed to what they can do through abilities or through skills. And then you also have inclinations, and inclinations are really cool little snapshot moments when a decision point takes place, like in a really impactful decision point in the adventure. Then you can call up one of these inclinations, make a D10 roll, try to beat the score of your inclination. And an inclination can be essentially the personality of the player playing that character in a way, because you have to kind of simulate what these players are going to use these characters to do. So You don't have to make that decision. You just basically check what their inclinations are, and kind of just like skills they apply to to a role or to a decision point where something crucial is about to happen. Anyway, so this is kind of the player sheet. There's like I said, there's room for the 4 abilities: traversal, observation, deduction, exploration. There is some success and failure tracking, so you can grow your character. Skills that they have, which are purely narrative, to replace or boost the abilities of the character. And that's how you would play normally Mappa Mundi, but only with this Dungeonology reskin. The idea that I have is for the journey, I will use this map, but before that, the research phase, the heroes will go to Roca Civetta, and in that building, they will encounter various NPCs that will help them with their quest if they pass their ability score. So you see down here these little cards. These little cards are typically students in Dungeonology, but in this case, we will just use them as NPCs. So you have an architect there, you have a deacon, an apprentice, and you can just draw these randomly to see what story unfolds. I can also, as the narrator, if I play the solo, I can also just create a story beforehand where these characters appear in, like a surgeon or a survivalist. So there are various of these characters that the chroniclers can interview and try to figure out more about the creature or the villain that they're trying to find the behaviors of. When that research phase is over and the journey cards have been laid out, there they will go onto a map. And let me see if I can do this without disrupting the whole business. So this is a map that is from Nova Aetus Renaissance that came with that game. And because it is in the same world as Dungeonology, this is great material to sort of just like use in Mappa Mundi. Like these buildings, also they can be used, to supplement the university and go to for these various characters to figure out what the story is. But more importantly, this will kind of give an idea of the kind of journey cards that you lay out to go from the university to like a far off place in Italy somewhere and travel there. So the idea with these cards, so say for instance they start out poor. Like one of the hints that they didn't get, the grasslands, you turn it over, it's inverted and it goes on the map, say somewhere, let me redirect to the camera a little bit here. So they go somewhere here. We can do the wetlands. For instance, the wetlands, they turn out okay. That's up there. Then maybe at a lake, give them a little bit more misfortune. Another journey card, a bigger challenge that occurs there at that lake, and then maybe at a stream that comes off of that lake, they end up there. Now, Mappa Mundi doesn't just have location cards. They also have opportunity cards and creature cards. And creature cards work the same as the monster cards, the target cards. They just have fewer behaviors, and so they are kind of like creatures that you encounter on the road. They shouldn't be too complicated, but they also are like a nice primer for characters to sink their teeth in before they meet the final enemy. But opportunities, they can be really good things. So you can also put them here. And so now you have like kind of a path trajectory laid out of locations and events that your heroes will go through. Now, how does that tie into Dungeonology? Well, I have a whole pack of cards here. In the game Dungeonology, these are actually clans, and they are the targets that you actually meet. But I like those cards better because I actually have miniatures for those cards. Like this guy, if that was going to be my first monster that you're trying to interact with and trying to figure out the behavior of, well, he obviously likes beer. But like I have the miniature already for them, and that goes with all of these bigger sort of characters in Dungeonology. So I would use that for the monster that you're trying to figure out. And these, which are actually the gold cards in Dungeonology, but they don't have miniatures. These could be like the creatures that you come on your way to reserve a warehouse or a painting. That could be an opportunity maybe. So these would be cool to use for that purpose. Now they all have these color-coded cubes that you actually use in Dungeonology. That, remember, they go on your player board back there. I would maybe just use them to overcome these creatures, because what I want to do with these locations is I want to use the actual Dungeonology boards of which there are a metric ton. There's literally, like, there's stacks here and here, and then there's more stacks up there on top of the box, which I can't show you because my camera doesn't reach that far. But like each time when they go to a location, like here, for instance, in the grasslands, I want them to encounter not, not the ocean, but like, for instance, yeah, for instance, this. Why not? This looks nefarious enough. So this could be, for instance, this grasslands area, like a close-up on the map. You close up onto one of these tiles from Dungeonology, and then you just populate these with cubes. And then when you overcome the challenge that may take place here, of which narratively you have to come up with yourself or be inspired by, in this case, by the background story of Dungeonology, particularly this expansion, this tile, because they all have like written out pieces of narrative. Then you could get these cubes, put them on your board, and then when you encounter one of these enemies along your way, maybe just spend those cubes that you have on your board to overcome this enemy. I don't know. That's something that I want to experiment with. It overlaps maybe a little bit too much into the board game area per se, and it doesn't stick closely enough to the role-playing game. But you know, it's all about having fun and about essentially just creating the experience that you want to have, which is what this video is all about. You can play the miniatures on locations, which I like to do. I like to have like an overview area of where I am in the world, and then a zoom in location on those tiles. I'll map it out. If I do a follow-up video, I will definitely show that off. But you could also play out the encounter, and maybe that's interesting for the final encounter with the boss. So let's just say that I have, well, let's just grab this guy here, say that we had him, and that we have Rebecca, and we have this little dude, and they are chroniclers. Now they may be hiding behind bushes because they of course don't want to be seen. Quarrelsome Ludus, he's just like, ooh, I have my little pint of beer and I'm happy. I'm gonna decorate out with some trees, maybe just for the sake of immersion. Maybe also because you just want to like actually hide them tactically. This of course doesn't matter for Dungeonology or actually Mappa Mundi. This is something that I would do as a table presence enhancer to sort of get into the mood, tell a story of how she basically like almost exposes herself towards Ludus, and then maybe one of the threads of the behavior of Ludus gets frayed in that instance, or, you know, whatever is the inspiration at that moment. The fun thing about if I do this solo, or if I am the narrator of Mappa Mundi, this game, I can introduce this to the players and be like, well, this is kind of how we play it. Let's go with it. The goal is to tell like a really good story. And that brings us to the final point, which is that locations like this, working together with the events or the journey, working together with the characters that you have, that all of these things work gloriously well together with both Dungeonology as well as with Mappa Mundi. And that is kind of the experience that I want to create. So playing Mappa Mundi, a non-combat exploration game that's very narrative, with Dungeonology, a non-combat board game, which is more mechanical, but of which I leave all the mechanicals out and I use the narrative system of Mappa Mundi. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you think is completely off my rocker in terms of an experiment. But I thought this is a good lead-in towards tabletop adventure design, where it's all about creating a beautiful table presence and telling a good story with beautiful components and really getting immersed into a cinematic experience. And until I show the next video, all I can say for now is keep exploring. No.